June 13th, 2022. It started off as an ordinary Monday evening, until it wasn't. By nightfall, a Houston neighborhood would be frozen in grief, a family would be shattered, and a mother's worst fear would become her permanent reality. Brittany Sorrells was like any other hard-working single mother, juggling shifts, managing bills, and doing her absolute best to create a safe, warm home for her 3 daughters. She didn't live in luxury, but what she had, she made count. Inside that apartment on Oxford Street lived more than just a mother and her girls. It housed dreams, laughter, bedtime stories, and a little girl named Khylie who had a glow you couldn't ignore. Khylie Sorrells, 9 years old, a 4th grader at Windsor Village Elementary. But even in a school full of bright minds, Khylie stood out. Teachers say she had this spark, always eager to help others, always cheering someone on. Whether it was classwork or a tough basketball game, she brought energy that lifted everyone around her. Khylie had this enthusiasm, that kind of kid who made you look forward to coming in every day. She had heart, more than most adults I know, and she was starting to find her passion too, through the Houston Police Department's Police Activities League, or PAL, a youth mentorship program that combines sports with leadership skills, community, and connection. Khylie wasn't just participating, she was thriving. She was forming bonds, learning trust, building confidence, and perhaps most importantly, she was making plans for summer, for school, for life. But none of those plans included what happened next. What started as a typical evening turned into a night that would haunt this family, this neighborhood, and this city forever. On the basketball court, Khylie Sorrells wasn't just playing a sport, she was stepping into her power. She wasn't the tallest player, not even the strongest, but determination, heart, she brought it every single time. She played with this rare balance of focus and pure joy. For Khylie, it wasn't about being the best. It was about showing up, giving your all, and lifting up those around you. But Kylie's impact didn't stop at the court. Back at home, she was a protector, a peacemaker, and a big sister in every sense of the word. She was only 9, but Khylie often looked after her 2 younger siblings, ages 7 and 1, with a calm responsibility that surprised even the adults. Neighbors would regularly see the 3 of them outside their apartment, Khylie leading sidewalk games, breaking up squabbles, and watching over her sisters like a little guardian. You'd think she was 19, not 9. She took care of those girls like it was her job, sweet but firm. You could tell she loved them deep. When the school books were closed and the basketball was put away, Khylie danced. Her TikTok videos, dozens of them, showed off her rhythm, her sass, her light. What once brought laughs now brings tears. Those videos are no longer content, they're cherished memories. Brittany Sorrells, their mother, was doing everything she could to hold that world together. She worked long hours, stretched every dollar, and created a home where her girls felt safe and loved. Their apartment wasn't much by most standards, but it echoed with laughter, music, bedtime stories, and the kind of fierce family bond that can't be bought. But beneath the surface of that love, something darker had been simmering. In the months leading up to June, Brittany had ended a relationship, an 8-month entanglement with 22-year-old Jeremiah Jones. What began as something casual had gradually turned toxic. Controlling behavior, mood swings, jealousy, and eventually fear. Brittany made the decision to leave, to cut ties, to protect herself and her girls. But sometimes, leaving is the most dangerous decision of all. And Jeremiah? He wasn't ready to let go. The breakup wasn't clean. It wasn't quiet. And it definitely wasn't over. Roughly 2 months before that horrific night in June, Brittany Sorrells ended her relationship with Jeremiah Jones. But for him, it wasn't just a breakup, it was a challenge. One he responded to with intimidation, and then with threats. What started as arguments over the phone turned into repeated threats. Some subtle, others blunt and terrifying. Brittany knew something was wrong. She could feel it. She reached out to the police, not once, but multiple times. She warned them, told them he was dangerous, that he was unstable, that she feared for her family's life. I told them he was dangerous. I told them he had threatened us. I begged them to do something, but the system failed her. Her calls for help were logged, yes. Her statements were noted, but no action strong enough to deter Jeremiah Jones was ever taken. The red flags were there, waving like sirens, and yet, no one came to stop what was about to happen. June 13th, 2022. Inside their modest home on Oxford Street, Brittany and her 3 daughters were winding down. A quiet evening, movie night, snacks on the coffee table, pajamas and laughter. Just a normal night in the life of a family who had already been through so much, just trying to find peace. They didn't know it yet, but within hours, their lives would be shattered. The walls that once echoed with Kylie's giggles and her sister's playful shouting would soon echo with screams. The floor that once held bedtime dances and storytime routines would soon be stained with violence. This wasn't random. This wasn't senseless. It was preventable. Before we continue with what happened that terrible night, if this story matters to you, if you believe voices like Kylie's deserve to be heard, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We bring light to the cases that are often overlooked, the human stories behind the headlines. Hit that notification bell to stay updated on our true crime documentaries. These stories matter, and your support helps us tell them. And in the comments, share your thoughts. Has the system ever failed someone you know? Have you recognized warning signs in your community? Your words could be the lifeline someone else needs. If you've ever followed a case where the system failed to connect the dots, you know this isn't rare. You've seen the warning signs ignored, the paperwork filed and forgotten, the people who fall through the cracks. This story is no different. To understand why this tragedy happened, we have to look at the man who would ultimately destroy a family's peace, Jeremiah Jones. At just 22 years old, Jeremiah already had a rap sheet that read like a slow-burning fuse. His criminal record stretched back into his late teens, starting with petty theft and trespassing, and gradually escalating. By his early 20s, he'd racked up arrests for burglary, evading arrest, and making threats. Charges piled up like warning signs, each one more serious than the last. And yet, he kept slipping through. Jones was known to law enforcement, not just for his crimes, but for his alleged connections to local gang activity. The depth of those ties was never fully confirmed, but one thing was crystal clear. He had access to weapons, and he knew how to use them. Despite his criminal history, he walked free more times than anyone can comfortably explain. Why? Because the system, once again, failed to treat him like the threat he was becoming. He faced no serious interventions, no long-term supervision, no real accountability. Former neighbors painted a familiar picture. An angry kid, always ready for a fight, someone who never seemed to grow past his worst impulses. His school records told the same story: chronic aggression, authority issues, multiple suspensions. It was the kind of record that hinted at something more dangerous brewing underneath. But again, no one stopped to dig deeper. And then he met Brittany. Fall of 2021. They crossed paths through mutual acquaintances. Friends remembered him as charming at first. Polite, generous, attentive. He played the role perfectly. The doting boyfriend, the helpful guest, the kind of man who'd offer to pick up groceries or play games with her daughters. But like so many stories of abuse, it started with love bombing. Fast attachment, quick entanglement, and then the mask began to slip. Jeremiah started spending more and more time at Brittany's apartment. He inserted himself into her daily life and her children's lives. That part is especially chilling, because when abusers target single mothers, they don't just manipulate the partner, they manipulate the entire family. Ask yourself this: how many times have you seen it start this way? A charming man, a vulnerable situation, a trusting heart, and no idea of the danger that was moving in. At first glance, it seemed like a whirlwind romance. But behind closed doors, things were moving too fast and in the wrong direction. The relationship between Brittany Sorrells and Jeremiah Jones escalated quickly. Within just weeks, Jones had firmly planted himself in Brittany's home and in her day-to-day life. The early messages between them were filled with affection and emoji-laced promises. "I'll protect you," he'd write. "You and the girls, you're my whole world." But then the tone started to change. By the third month, the warmth gave way to control. What Brittany once saw as devotion now looked more like surveillance. Jones monitored her social media. He questioned her about male coworkers. He got agitated if she didn't reply quickly enough. Even time with her own family became a point of conflict. That's how it starts. Quiet, invasive, subtle at first, controlling behavior masquerading as love. Friends noticed that Brittany stopped going out. She canceled more plans, seemed quieter. That wasn't a coincidence. By April 2022, after 8 increasingly turbulent months, Brittany ended the relationship. She'd had enough of the accusations, the jealousy, the emotional chaos. But what she hoped would be a clean break only fueled the fire. Jones didn't walk away. He didn't respect her decision. He escalated. In the weeks following the breakup, Brittany began receiving threatening messages. The tone turned darker, colder. He accused her of betrayal. He blamed her for everything. She reported him. She told police she was scared. She named him as a danger to her and her children. But nothing changed. And here's where it gets even more chilling. After Jones's arrest, 2 former girlfriends came forward. Their stories? Almost identical. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern. One woman described how Jones would criticize her outfits, then pick fights before she went out, so she wouldn't go at all. Another said he'd sabotage her friendships by spreading rumors or confronting people in public. One recounted how he once showed up to her workplace, just to check if she was really there. And each story followed the same dark curve. Love bombing, isolation, surveillance, control, threats. And Brittany was already on that same track. By the time she ended things, she was already cut off, monitored, and afraid. She did what many victims do. She tried to walk away, rebuild her space, and protect her children. But Jones was never going to let her go quietly. By May 2022, the warning signs were no longer subtle. They were loud, public, and painfully obvious. Neighbors in the Oxford Street complex had seen it all. They watched as Jeremiah Jones confronted Brittany outside her apartment more than once, shouting threats, blocking her from closing her front door, making scenes that left children frightened and neighbors uneasy. This wasn't a man who had taken no for an answer. Even after their breakup, Jones was spotted lurking in the apartment complex parking lot. He had no reason to be there, no business near that building, but there he was watching. Houston police responded to 2 separate calls from Brittany's apartment about Jones showing up uninvited. Each time, by the time officers arrived, Jones had already vanished. All they could do was file incident reports. No arrests, no charges, no real consequences. What police and prosecutors would later uncover was chilling. This wasn't just harassment. This was a campaign of targeted intimidation, and the system that should have stopped it had failed again and again. On the night of June 13, 2022, Jeremiah Jones was out on bond for 5 separate pending criminal cases. Yes, you heard that right. 5. These weren't minor infractions, and each new arrest should have triggered a full review of his bond conditions. But it didn't. Jones kept walking free, even with missed court dates, even with court-ordered restrictions violated, even with new charges piling up, he remained in the community. Turns out, his supervision was fragmented. Case management records revealed that due to staffing shortages, Jones had been passed between multiple probation officers. That created gaps. Gaps where oversight disappeared. Gaps where violent offenders could move unnoticed. Jones had even been ordered to wear an electronic monitor. But it was never activated. No GPS. No tracking. No restrictions. He could go anywhere. Do anything. And no one would know until it was too late. And all the while, Brittany Sorrells was still trying to protect herself. In May, Jones sent her increasingly disturbing messages. Some were hauntingly direct. "You think you can just throw me away? Nobody else gets to have you if I can't." She showed those texts to her family, told them she was scared, said something didn't feel right. She knew. On June 6th, just 1 week before the shooting, Jones called Brittany 7 times in one day. During one of those calls, he delivered the clearest threat yet. "You'll be sorry if you don't come back." On June 7th, Brittany went to the Houston Police Department. Again, she filed another report, brought screenshots, call logs, everything. She told them his behavior was escalating, that she feared for her life. But once more, the system stalled. No protective order was issued. No follow-up conducted. No arrest warrant was filed. Jeremiah Jones was free. And Brittany, she was running out of time. Monday, June 13th, 2022. It started just like any other summer day in Houston's Heights neighborhood. The afternoon heat peaked at 95 degrees. Families stayed inside. Kids played quietly. The hum of air conditioners filled the silence between cicadas. And on Oxford Street, inside a modest apartment nestled among a row of identical units, the Sorrells family was winding down. By 10:30 p.m., the streets outside were still. Dinner was done. The baby was asleep. The television flickered in the background. And inside that apartment, a single mother had created something rare. A moment of peace. Brittany had prepared snacks. She and her daughters huddled together in the living room, movie on the screen. 9-year-old Khylie and her 7-year-old sister had built a fort of blankets and pillows, giggling from beneath the fortress. The baby, just a year old, slept soundly in a portable crib nearby. This was the kind of night every parent lives for. Quiet, safe, or at least it should have been. What Brittany didn't know was that danger wasn't far away. In fact, it had already called her phone 6 times between 8:45 and 10:15 p.m. She had answered the first call. Less than a minute later, she hung up. No one knows exactly what was said during those 53 seconds, but the silence that followed would soon be shattered. Let's rewind for just a moment, because to truly understand how we got here, how a man with a long criminal history was able to walk freely into a woman's life and destroy it, we need to talk about the system that allowed it to happen. After the events of June 13th, Harris County officials launched a formal audit into Jones's case. The findings? A systemic collapse at nearly every level. Red Circle risk assessment tools didn't properly factor in Jones's escalating charges. Red Circle prosecutors reviewing new cases often lacked access to his full criminal history. Red Circle Brittany's reports were assigned for follow-up, but no protective measures were ever put in place. Let that sink in. This man was out on 5 bonds at once, for serious charges. He missed court, violated bond terms, and he still walked free. The specialized domestic violence unit, in charge of reviewing Brittany's complaints, backlogged, short-staffed, overwhelmed. Cases that showed clear danger markers were delayed or overlooked entirely. Bond monitoring, largely reduced to phone calls instead of in-person check-ins. Court systems had become assembly lines. The individual context, the red flags, the risk patterns, got lost in the shuffle, and Jeremiah Jones knew how to exploit those gaps. He understood the system. He knew how long it would take them to respond. He had weeks of freedom to plan his next move. And on the night of June 13th, with a phone in one hand and rage simmering just below the surface, he was already closing in. Brittany had done everything right. She filed reports. She documented threats. She sought help from the system designed to protect her. But the system didn't act. And as her daughters huddled together under a blanket fort, watching a movie meant to distract them from the chaos of life, Jeremiah Jones was preparing to cross a line no family should ever have to endure. The phone kept ringing. 6 times that night, Jeremiah Jones called Brittany's phone. She answered only once. The remaining 5 calls? Straight to voicemail. Earlier that evening, Brittany's cousin had stopped by. She stayed for a while, talked, checked in, and then left around 9:30 p.m. Later, that same cousin would tell investigators something chilling. After that call from Jones, Brittany had looked uneasy, nervous, on edge. She checked the locks on the doors twice before sitting back down with her children. It was a small detail, one that, in hindsight, spoke volumes. She knew something was wrong. She could feel it. Across the street, a security camera from a local business recorded a car circling the neighborhood. Not once, not twice, 3 times. At exactly 10:32 p.m., the footage shows a man, matching Jones's height and build, leaving the vehicle and walking toward Brittany's apartment building. 2 minutes later, a neighbor in the next unit heard something unusual. The doorknob rattled. Then, the door opened. Jones had either found it unlocked or used a key from his past relationship with Brittany. Either way, what came next wasn't just a violation of space. It was an explosion of control, anger, and violence. According to Brittany's statement to police, the moment he entered, he didn't hesitate. He didn't knock. He didn't pause. He came through the door angry, agitated, and confrontational. His first words weren't a greeting. They were a demand. Why hadn't she answered his calls? The children, frozen in fear, stayed hidden in their makeshift fort, watching in silence as their world shifted into chaos. Jones stormed past them. He zeroed in on Brittany. In the apartment next door, neighbors later told investigators they heard a man shouting. Moments later, loud crashes echoed through the walls. Items being thrown, glass breaking, something heavy hitting the floor. Inside the apartment, Jones demanded Brittany's phone. When she hesitated, he snatched it from her hand. Then, he turned his attention to the television mounted on the wall. He claimed it was his, that it belonged to him, and in a furious show of dominance, he ripped it from the wall, cracking drywall and destroying the screen. Brittany tried to calm him, her voice low, careful. Her children were watching, listening, terrified. She told him to leave, that this wasn't the time, that they could talk about his things later. But he wasn't there to talk, and he wasn't there to leave. Every word Brittany spoke was met with more hostility. More aggression. The night had started as a peaceful movie moment with her daughters. Now, her living room was a battlefield. What happened next would turn an already terrifying domestic dispute into something far worse. A horror no child should ever witness, and a nightmare no mother should ever endure. After ripping the television from the wall and berating Brittany, Jones noticed movement down the hallway. Khylie, just 9 years old, had retreated to the bedroom, trying to escape the chaos. Jones followed her. Brittany, sensing something far more dangerous was about to happen, acted instinctively. She rushed after him, trying to get between her daughter and the man now consumed by rage. That's when he pulled out a handgun. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He just fired. The first shot struck Brittany in the shoulder, knocking her off her feet and temporarily paralyzing her ability to protect her daughter. Then, Jones turned the weapon on Khylie and pulled the trigger. Twice. Kylie's 7-year-old sister had watched everything unfold from the doorway. She didn't scream. She didn't move. Somehow, she stayed unnoticed. Within seconds, Jones bolted from the apartment. From the moment he entered to the moment he disappeared, the entire attack lasted less than 10 minutes. At 10:46 p.m., the first 911 call came in. Gunshots. Oxford Street. Screaming heard. By 10:53 p.m., Houston police officers arrived on the scene. The front door was ajar. Inside, they found Brittany, conscious but severely wounded, trying desperately to reach her daughter. She had been shot, but she was still fighting, still trying to save Khylie. Paramedics rushed Khylie to Memorial Hermann Hospital. They initiated emergency protocols en route. But her injuries, they were too severe. Khylie was pronounced dead at 11:26 p.m. She was 9 years old. Brittany, though in critical condition, remained stable enough to speak. And when she did, she didn't hesitate. She gave investigators a clear, direct identification. Jeremiah Jones was the shooter. Within the hour, Brittany's cousin returned to the scene after hearing about the shooting. She confirmed everything Brittany had said. The threats, the stalking, the growing fear Brittany had felt in the final weeks leading up to this night. Neighbors from 3 separate apartments came forward. Each had heard the yelling. Each had heard the gunshots. Each described hearing a man's voice, angry, loud, explosive, followed by 2 cracks of a firearm. One neighbor looked out their window moments after the shots and saw a man matching Jones's description sprinting from the building. He climbed into a dark-colored sedan and sped away. Another resident, living on the ground floor, had crossed paths with Jones in the stairwell just minutes before the shooting. He noticed Jones looked tense, agitated, eyes darting. Later, this same neighbor would help police confirm the suspect's identity through photo lineup. The picture he picked out, Jeremiah Jones. The story that had been unfolding quietly, tragically, behind the closed doors of that Oxford Street apartment, was now front-page news. The story of what happened to Khylie Sorrells and her mother Brittany is not just a heartbreaking account of one family's tragedy. It's a brutal reminder of what can happen when the systems designed to protect vulnerable people fail. We tell stories like this because they matter. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your engagement helps shine a light on critical issues like domestic violence prevention and justice system reform. And if you believe, like we do, that awareness leads to accountability, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. The comment section below is open for your thoughts. Let's talk about how we can do better. For Khylie, and for every child like her. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next part of this investigation. Because what happened after that horrific night, it set off one of the most urgent manhunts Houston has seen in recent years. Within minutes of the 911 calls pouring in, officers from the Houston Police Department converged on the Oxford Street apartment. The first units on scene secured the perimeter as paramedics rushed in to treat the victims. Brittany, still conscious but bleeding heavily. Khylie, unresponsive. Recognizing the severity of the scene, the shift commander didn't hesitate. He activated HBD's Homicide Division and issued an all-points bulletin for one man, Jeremiah Jones. Detective Marcus Rivera, the lead investigator, arrived by 11:15 p.m. He immediately established a command post inside the building's management office. Rivera and his team went to work. They coordinated canvases of the neighborhood, collected surveillance footage, and set up a secure perimeter to preserve the crime scene. Given Jones's violent past and the sheer brutality of this attack, Rivera requested tactical support. By midnight, Specialized units were deployed across the Houston metro area. Every officer had Jones's photo and a description of his vehicle. And just in case he circled back, protective details were assigned to guard the hospital where Brittany was being treated. They weren't taking any chances. Inside the apartment, the forensics team began piecing together what happened. The scene spoke volumes. The living room bore signs of chaos. The TV ripped from the wall. DVD cases and toys scattered. Furniture knocked over. It was clear this had started as an argument. But it didn't stay that way. In the bedroom, investigators recovered 2 shell casings. Trajectory analysis indicated the shooter, Jones, stood in the doorway, firing downward. Khylie had likely been sitting or lying on the bed when she was hit. Blood pattern evidence confirmed that Brittany was shot first, near the bedroom entrance. Only after she collapsed did Jones move toward Khylie. This wasn't random. This was targeted. In Jones's rush to escape, he made a mistake. He dropped Brittany's phone. Inside that phone were weeks of threatening messages, vile declarations of jealousy, text after text showing a man obsessed with control. Those messages would soon become a key part of the prosecution's case. Surveillance footage recovered from nearby businesses and residential buildings captured Jones's vehicle circling the area multiple times. There was no doubt he'd come there that night with a plan. While the rest of Houston slept, technicians at the police laboratory were wide awake, processing every fragment of evidence from the Oxford Street apartment. Ballistics experts confirmed that both bullets, one that struck Brittany and the other that killed 9-year-old Khylie, had been fired from the same weapon, a 9mm handgun. The ammunition? A match for the exact brand Jones had purchased just 3 weeks earlier, according to transaction records from a local gun store. DNA analysis didn't stop there. Touch DNA recovered from the apartment door handle, and the ripped TV mount matched Jeremiah Jones, placing him at the scene beyond all doubt. His fingerprints were found on a water glass in the kitchen, a small but telling clue. Jones had either been there recently or frequently enough to leave behind prints that hadn't yet been wiped away. Digital forensics specialists extracted dozens of threatening messages and call logs from Brittany's phone. The timeline they built showed a clear escalation, Jones's tone growing darker, more desperate, and more dangerous as June 13th approached. One message, sent just hours before the shooting, was blunt. "You think you're gonna get away from me that easy?" By sunrise, the manhunt was in full swing. Jeremiah Jones's face was everywhere. On the news, on social media, on law enforcement bulletins across the state. Detectives reached out to Jones's known associates, former partners, family members. All claimed to have no idea where he was. But tech told another story. At 2:13 a.m., cell phone data showed Jones's device pinging from Houston's 3rd Ward. Then, it went dark. Just over an hour later, at 3:27 a.m., a gas station camera caught him buying fuel, still wearing the same clothing described by witnesses at the Oxford Street apartment. He was on the move, and running out of places to hide. Most tips pouring into the Houston Police Department that morning were dead ends, until 11:42 a.m. That's when the manager of an apartment complex in southeast Houston made a crucial call. He'd seen Jones's face on the news, and now he was certain he'd just watched the suspect enter a unit registered to a former girlfriend. At 1:15 p.m., less than 15 hours after the shooting, the Houston Police SWAT team arrived at the scene. They moved swiftly, evacuated nearby apartments, locked down the perimeter, and confirmed Jones's presence inside using thermal imaging. Loudspeakers echoed through the complex. "Jeremiah Jones, you're surrounded. Come out with your hands up." Jones refused. For 45 tense minutes, he remained inside, barricaded, defiant. Police deployed diversionary tactics. Smoke, noise, pressure. At 2:03 p.m., the standoff ended. Jones stepped out the front door, hands raised, face expressionless. He was taken into custody without further violence. From there, he was transported straight to Houston Police Headquarters. Within days, investigators assembled an ironclad case. And it got stronger with every hour. The gun used to murder Khylie? Recovered from the apartment where Jones was arrested, hidden in a closet. Ballistics testing confirmed it was the exact weapon used on June 13th. The same weapon that ended a little girl's life, and changed her family's forever. Brittany provided a detailed statement from her hospital bed, recounting the events with clarity. Even while recovering from her injuries, Brittany Sorrells' testimony provided the backbone of the case. But it was the voice of her 7-year-old daughter that added heartbreaking clarity. Specially trained child interview specialists worked closely with the young girl, ensuring her memories were documented without compounding her trauma. Meanwhile, investigators tightened the net. Security footage placed Jones at the apartment complex, both before and after the shooting. Cell phone records painted an unbroken timeline of his movements. Combined with eyewitness accounts, physical evidence, and digital forensics, prosecutors would later describe what they had built as an airtight case. Within 48 hours of his arrest, the Harris County District Attorney's Office formally charged Jeremiah Jones with 2 major felonies: capital murder for the death of 9-year-old Khylie Sorrells, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon for the shooting of Brittany Sorrells. The capital murder charge, the most serious available under Texas law, was applied because Khylie was under 10 years old. In Texas, that distinction makes the crime automatically capital under the Texas Penal Code. Prosecutors didn't mince words. The charges were explicit, alleging premeditation, a pattern of harassment and threats, and a calculated attack intended to inflict the maximum psychological damage. Jones, they argued, had committed an act of revenge against a mother by murdering her child. Jones's first court appearance came on June 16, 2022. He walked in wearing the standard orange jumpsuit, wrists cuffed at the waist, expressionless. Presiding over the hearing was Judge Maria Jackson, a veteran of Houston's criminal courts. Prosecutors argued for no bail, citing the brutal nature of the crime and Jones's record of violating prior bonds. The defense pushed for a bail amount, however minimal, they argued. But Judge Jackson refused outright, calling Jones a significant flight risk and a danger to the community. In the back of the courtroom, members of Brittany's family sat in quiet solidarity. Brittany herself, still recovering from her gunshot wound, was not present, but her voice and Khylie's memory filled the room. Over the next 3 years, the legal battle unfolded with methodical precision. In August 2022, a grand jury indictment formally charged Jones with capital murder and aggravated assault. Throughout 2023, the defense filed motion after motion to suppress evidence, to delay proceedings, to request psychological evaluations for Jones, attempting to lay the groundwork for a possible insanity defense. But prosecutors held firm. They had what few homicide cases ever offer: eyewitness testimony, physical evidence, surveillance footage, digital tracking, forensic confirmation, and motive. By early 2024, the courtroom became a battleground over evidence. The defense pushed to exclude the threatening text messages and prior domestic violence reports, claiming they were prejudicial. Prosecutors argued otherwise, saying they established clear motive and intent. The trial officially began in January 2025, but jury selection alone took 3 weeks, a reflection of the case's high-profile status and the possibility of a death sentence. Opening statements were delivered on February 17th. Prosecutors meticulously outlined a timeline, from the first threats to the murder of a child whose only crime was being loved by her mother. In March, Brittany Sorrells took the stand. Her voice, shaken but unbroken, recounted the horror of that night and the months of escalating fear leading up to it. Her testimony gave jurors more than facts. It gave them context, emotion, and truth. Back in September 2022, prosecutors had already confirmed their intent to seek the death penalty. That decision, while expected, rekindled debate about capital punishment in Texas. They cited multiple aggravating factors: the victim's age, just 9 years old, the deliberate targeting of the child, the murder occurring during another felony, the shooting of Brittany, and Jones's extensive history of violence. In short, they said this wasn't just a crime of passion. It was an act of vengeance, fueled by rage and carried out with deliberate cruelty. The defense, for their part, pushed back. They filed motions raising mental health concerns and highlighting Jones's background, hoping to soften the court's stance on the death penalty. But psychological evaluations deemed him competent to stand trial. The capital case proceeded. Outside the courtroom, the Houston community rallied behind the Sorrells family. A GoFundMe campaign raised over $85,000 to help cover Khylie's funeral and Brittany's recovery. At Windsor Village Elementary, where Khylie had once dreamed of becoming a basketball star, hundreds attended a memorial service. Her teammates in the Police Activities League program arrived in uniform, each one carrying a single flower. The Houston Police Department went further. They established a trust fund for Brittany's surviving children. and officers who had known Khylie personally served as honorary pallbearers at her funeral. Kylie's death became a catalyst for change. Community activists and legal experts condemned the system's failure. How someone with multiple violent charges was released on bond again and again. By late 2022, the Harris County Commissioner's Court formed a task force to review bond practices in domestic violence cases. Their June 2023 report led to sweeping changes. Now, more rigorous reviews are required when bond requests involve defendants with prior threats or violence. The Houston Area Women's Center launched a new intervention team, focused specifically on protecting families where children are at risk. They named it Kylie's Shield. And perhaps the most meaningful legacy of all, the one built by Brittany herself, is the Khylie Sorrells Foundation. Its mission? To support children impacted by domestic violence, and to fund after-school basketball programs in underserved neighborhoods. Windsor Village Elementary honored Khylie by renovating their gymnasium, unveiling a mural of her smiling, basketball in hand, at the entrance. The Houston Police Department also expanded their Police Activities League, making sure more children like Khylie can find guidance, support, and safety through sports and mentorship. Khylie Sorrells' story reminds us, behind every statistic, behind every headline, is a child with hopes, dreams, and a future worth protecting.